people.
Can I interrupt and ask if there are particular questions or comments you'd like to
Very
share with
complex
each
story
other?
with a lot of issues.
The whole group.
You just can't say I am for, I'm against. Just and people have been also experienced threats from these people.
Okay.
Attacks.
Anybody got a question of
fear.
Shakira or Jackie? Perhaps a comment. Simon.
Yeah. Not for me, just pose one mainly to Shakira. Just interested to know what your opinion would be about the best way to handle hate preachers in general, whether they are like Geert Wilders or it's an Anjem Chowdhury or Abu Qatada. Is it best to tolerate and to allow freedom of expression and entry into our countries, or to ban or to expel? Yeah. I'm contrasting a bit the situation with the United Kingdom and Australia, where Geert Wilders was banned from entry, and as a result, got, I think, rather a lot of publicity. So,
yeah, it's always a hard balance. And sometimes I think that there's okay, if you're talking about hate speech, you can have particular laws and then use your discretion about whether or not you actually enforce them. I realise that sounds like slippery slope. But the Islamic Council of Victoria, I think, was like the religious vilification laws in this state. The first case to be brought was by the Islamic Council of Victoria against the Catch the Fire Ministries. Now, I support those laws, but I think, and I'm pretty sure that ICV now thinks that there was a mistake. Those weren't criminal sanctions, that was a civil case. And I think it was a mistake on their part to bring it. I think that those laws should be in place. But I think that you can also say that it was a misjudgment. And as you say, there's always the danger that you're just making more publicity for people if you ban them from the country, if you don't let them have entry. I mean, Wilders was getting a lot of mileage in his own speech about the fact that he had been deemed not a suitable person to speak in Western Australia because racism never happens there. But anyhow, so I think those are kind of case-by-case judgment calls rather than, does that make sense? And yeah, I think like even Corey Bernardi, who met with Wilders in the Netherlands, decided that he was just too busy to meet him when he came to Australia, say. And so he came to Australia. I think it was good that his visa was delayed for so long because it gave time for everybody to talk about it and to, because he applied several months beforehand and was initially knocked back. Well, that interval gave time. Well, it gave time for Tony Abbott to put Corey Bernardi on a leash for a start. And it gave time for everybody to have talks together and work out and really, and for the major Muslim organisations to decide that they would not give him more attention and to put their own Corey Bernardis on leashes as well. So, yeah, I think it's good to have those, breaks, perhaps rather, sorry, I'm searching for metaphors. It's good to have those obstacles, but perhaps they shouldn't be, perhaps they should just be things that make it a bit harder to climb over rather than things that absolutely make it impossible. Yeah. So there were, and you might remember, they were white and all over the TV, but they were mostly sort of lefties, they were mostly Trotskyists, I'm pretty sure, just at a guess, who protested noisily outside and jostled and whatever with the police and lots of good footage for the news and so on. And they're not disability friendly, I will add, because I got there with the taxi and they weren't letting any cars through. And and they were chanting Nazi, 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 and I was there with my walking stick and all, and I was like, can you not just let my cab through because blah, 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 and they wouldn't. And I said, yeah, right, Hitler didn't like the disabled either, just saying. Sorry, just my personal little grudge there. Sorry. Yeah.
Other comment, question? No?
I recall in the 1950s when the 1950s there was thought of Catholics regaining control of certain countries in Europe, especially in Holland, and that was an issue. Whereas I don't believe it would be an issue today. In those days, when religious associations were much stronger, this was still a feature. And of course, given the higher birth rate among Catholics in Holland, it became an issue. Never dominant, but it was talked about.
Yeah. It comes up with school funding in Australia too. I mean, I don't think that there's a huge push I don't think that Muslim parents particularly desire to send their children to Muslim schools, but if there's funding to set them up, then some Muslim associations will do so, and then parents will send their kids there. I would prefer that there wasn't, that the overall funding system was different and was going into state schools, and and I don't think it's good for Muslim communities to be diverting so much of their attention and so many of their students into Muslim schools on the whole. But when you try to make that point, it again goes back to Catholics. Do you not know about the Labour Party split in the 50s until about the Catholics? You knew about the Catholics. Sorry, I realise that wasn't your point, but it is interesting though, because all these things which people tend to talk about as being new to Europe, to Australia, or whatever, they're really not. They're a revisiting of old issues. They're a revisiting of the Labour Party split. They're and even terrorism, for God's sake. Like in Spain, well, initially the Madrid bombing, they thought it was the and anybody who lived in London during the 80s and 90s will remember the IRA bombings, and then people, and I understand people have concerns about things like Sharia courts, but really observant Catholics don't regard themselves as divorced unless the Vatican says not divorced, but annulled of whatever reasons. And getting a Jewish divorce, if you, that if you're highly observant and highly orthodox, that is extremely complicated and difficult, and if your husband absolutely refuses, impossible task too. So they're not suddenly new and unheard of.
If I can just add to this, what Raoul was bringing up and picking up on Shakira. I guess what's important to also remember is that the issue of racism is connected to multicultural policies, and we hear a lot about multiculturalism failing in Europe, and that was this point to Australia, is that it's failed there, it's going to happen to you here. But in fact, Europe and the different nation states within Europe have had very different histories of managing ethnic diversity that's vastly different to what's happening in Australia as well. And I think, in the conversation we tend to kind of conflate and assume that to be multicultural means the same thing. It's vastly, yes, it's vastly different. So in the Netherlands, for instance, it started off with these pillar systems where, according to religion, where Protestants and Catholics, etc., where there was much more self-autonomy within these communities to have their own education systems, their own churches, their own community organizations internally. And so when you started then having more migrant populations coming in, that notion of parallel societies was very overt and very clear in ways that are completely different, of course, to Australia and or Canadian ways of managing immigration populations into the dominant in society as well. So I think that's one of the kind of yes, the delaying of the visa for builders was important because it provided some circuit breakers, but I was disappointed that there wasn't enough information about the particularities of the Netherlands and their concerns about what this fear of Islam means in that context, and that it's not translatable, you know, to the Australian context as well. So those are the kinds of issues I think that is really important for us all as educators to communicate and to be aware of, in ways in which policy and the multiculturalisms that they're talking about, the threat that it poses. Australia is very shallow in that sense of ethnic communities. You know, we've got many different communities, but they're fairly shallow. In Europe, you've got deeper ethnic communities. So you know, you've got many more just in sheer numbers and the ways in which they live in closer proximity as well. Therefore, the impact is perceived as so much more significant than it is in the Australian context, where we're shallower and therefore more disparate and diverse as well. So those are the sorts of things that the scaremongering really did not cotton on to, I think, which was a shame. But you know, I was pleased to see in Sydney, he was in, you know, way off in French's Forest or somewhere, you know, in a tiny little community hall. It was actually, it looked pathetic, and which is what it should look. So in terms of whether we ban, I think that's where it comes back to comedians like Somuchu, you know, who says, don't just ban it, we've actually got to demystify it, we've actually got to laugh at it, point to its incongruities, engage, find different entry points in order to demystify it. When you ban something, when you block something, it's actually going to make it much more attractive because it's seen as somehow so much more tantalizing because it's forgotten, you know. So that's I think one of the ways. It's a difficult one, censorship regulation when it comes to issues of racism.
I mean, that's the attraction of his books, I hear, like certain Muslim organizations as well. It's banned, therefore it must be sexy. Sexy in terms of
Time for one last question before we break for morning tea. Cassie.
Well, I just wanted to pick up on...
Sorry, could you just...
I just wanted to pick up on what Jackie said about this demystifying and attracting interest in such activities and behaviors. That in Europe, Wilders was also known for not only disliking Islamists, but generally immigrants. So he established or opened an internet website on which he encouraged Dutch people to write how much they hate Poles coming at that time to the Netherlands. So, of course, well, Poland was, you know, enraged, and it led to Minister of Foreign Affairs actually ordered a survey in Netherlands. Okay, so let's not get upset or angry with that. Let's check what the responses were. So the survey that they made in the Netherlands showed different results, and actually it was confirmed that most, because actually there was the interest in the website was quite interesting in itself. There were over 170,000, you know, yeah, and actually complaints. That they were checking that many of them were about bad parking or not good driving skills. But it started part of this kind of angry behavior on both sides. It actually started some sort of more common sense discussion, like, okay, let's check what are these problems, let's see. So it is this kind of demystifying or way of inviting people. Let's have a look. Let's discuss. Let's see what's wrong. So just to add to what Jacqueline said.
Thank you. I think let's draw a line across this session, and great commodity. Can I say thank you very much indeed to Jackie and Shakira for the way that led us into unpacking, demystifying might be a good term, the issues around religion and identity as our themes have been done. Thank you very much indeed.